Art Lessons with me, Jennifer Stapher-Thomas. Hi. Let's go. Vamos. Let's go. Vamos. The color wheel. Color relationships and schemes. Part 1. Color temperatures, analogous colors, and monochromatic color schemes. Color theory. The three most basic parts of color theory are the color wheel, color relationships, and color value. A color wheel divides colors by their temperature, warm and cool. Pretty cool, huh? The warm colors on that part of the color wheel that you see, well, they remind us of things like sunshine. The cool colors, like nighttime, the moon. Warm, sunflowers, fall, Chile, fire, the desert. Cool colors, forest, ice cubes and mint, a summer field, grass, icebergs. Contrast that cool blue arrow with the warm background, and contrast that yellow warm arrow with the cool background. Notice how eye-catching the cool and warm contrast looks. The principle of design, contrast, the pairing of opposites. Contrast is a principle of design that refers to the relationship of opposites such as dark and light, bright and dull, warm and cool, large and small, organic and geometric, smooth and rough textures, hard and soft edges. Let's examine how artists use the principle of design, of contrast, of the pairing of opposites. Look at the dark and light. Notice those birds with the background all white, how they stand out in silhouette. Very eye-catching. And then the picture below, bright and dull. Notice that that's a whale. And the whale is made out of rainbow colors. And the background is contrasted by these really kind of muddy and moody tones. Really eye-catching, really beautiful. When you pair opposites together in art, it makes for a lot of visual interest. This is a painting by me, Jennifer Stapher-Thomas. It's entitled Mountain Pass Fog Plume, and it is a painting I did of the way that I felt about this morning when it was very, very foggy in the mountains of the Franklin Mountains here in El Paso, Texas. And I waited around to see what would happen after driving through the mountains and through the fog. And I came around to the northeast side of the mountains when the sun was coming up and the fog was lifting. And I saw this giant cloud, like a puff of smoke almost, or vaping. And it was breathing out of the mountains, and I thought it was fabulous. And so I wanted to paint it, and I made a contrast of the warm mountains and the cool sky. Contrasting opposites. Let's look at how artists use large and small, those opposites, contrast. We've looked at light and dark, dull and bright, warm and cool, and this painting, it really displays so beautifully how dramatic the pairing of opposites can be. Notice the little figure holding on to the butterfly, the very large butterfly, which in fact has a map of the world in its wings. It creates a very mystical feeling, and the proportions of the large and small are so surprising. We've examined how artists use contrast, the pairing of opposites, a principle of design, and we've seen how artists use dark and light, bright and dull, warm and cool, large and small. And now let's look at how artists, and this is Leger, one of my favorite artists, I believe from the 1940s, and he was just brilliant at comparing organic and geometric. Well, let's take a look at this piece. Do you see the geometric shapes? The geometric shapes are long, thick lines that form rather square-like figures, and then there's the rounded shapes in this beautiful monochromatic piece. Do you see how interesting it looks? It looks kind of like a living machine. Let's continue investigating the principle of design, contrast, the pairing of opposites. This is another painting by me, Jennifer Stapher-Thomas, and it's called Waiting for Daybreak. And it was a fantasy I had about a beautiful rooster protecting his hens during the night here in the desert. And what's there not to admire about a beautiful rooster? Well, what I was comparing here too was color and lack of color, but as well as that, smooth and rough textures. And that was one of the things that you can see very, very clearly in this painting when we look at it technically and just look at contrast. Dark and light too, obviously. Small and large? Bright and dull? Yes. There's another area of the principle of design of contrast, the opposites, and it has to do with edges, hard and soft edges. If you look at the diagram on the left, you'll see the hard edges. And then look at below that, it says soft edges, where it's got to do with shadowing, with value structure. In a shadow where it's really, really dark, and there is a line, that's a hard edge, where you can see movement values that tell you that it goes in and out or up and down. Those are called soft edges. Now, if you look at the lady on the right, you'll see that there are shadows around her nose that are very soft, and her eyes as well. And then when you have a hard line, that's a hard edge. So sometimes in art, we really want to have hard and soft edges. And some artists, they just use all hard edges too because it's part of their style. Let's get back to color theory, and let's talk about how colors are relative. Relative in this case means considered in relation or in proportion to something else. So colors behave according to what color they are next to. Colors, like people, are influenced by each other. Well, color temperatures as well as colors they're relative. It depends on what they're next to. Now there are always cooler varieties of any hue and warmer ones as well. So there are cooler violets and warmer violets. Well, if you make a blue violet, the blue violets have more blue in them than pure violet. Do you see that blue arrow? Now look next door, magenta, red violet. Red violet has more red in them than pure violet, indicated by my hand with the red arrow. So if you were going to make a pure violet into a red violet, you would add red. And if you're going to make a blue violet, you would add blue. So again, there are warmer violets and cooler violets, and the cool blue and blue violet make it cooler in temperature than pure violet. And the warm red in red violet make it warmer in temperature than pure violet, right? Yeah. Color temperatures are relative. There are warmer blues and cooler blues. Blue-greens have more yellow in them than pure blue. The warm yellow in blue-green makes it warmer in temperature than pure blue. Blues are cooler than blue-greens. Blue tints are made with white, and the white also makes it appear cooler. Boy, next to true blue, or more true bluish, those blue-greens look very green, don't they? Well, maybe they're like green-blue or blue-green, because there's warmer blues and cooler blues, and shades of blues and tints of blues. After all, color is relative. Well, let's look at these. There are warm greens and cool greens. Blue greens are cooler than yellow greens because they have more blue than yellow in them. Do you see that with the blue arrow? Isn't that pretty? Well, yellow greens have more yellow than blue in them. You can see that. Look how beautifully the contrast of the warm blues and the yellow blues looks. Yellow greens have more yellow in them than pure green. And that extra yellow makes them warmer than like regular pure green. And blue-greens have more blue in them than pure blue. The extra blue makes them cooler than pure blue. Isn't that beautiful? The analogous colors. Wow, we've done a lot already. We have covered color temperature, the principle of contrast, and we've covered how colors are relative. And we just scratched the surface. Now we're going to examine analogous colors. It's real easy. You'll like it. Vocabulary time. What does analogous mean? Similar, comparable, or comparable, closely related. Analogy examples. Glove is to hand as sock is to foot. Panel is to door as pane is to window. They serve the same or similar function. So what you're looking at is you're looking at pictures of analog dials. Gee, do they look familiar? Compare that to digital dials. Analog dials always go around, well, like a clock, right? And digital gives you the numbers. So analogous comes from analog. They're next door in a circular pattern. Red, orange, and yellow are analogous to each other. Do you see that? Yellow, green, and blue are analogous to each other also. Blue, violet, and red are analogous to each other as well. Do you see that? This is a very simple color wheel. Now let's look at a more complex one. Red, orange, orange, and yellow-orange are analogous. Yellow, yellow-green, and green are analogous to each other. Yellow-green, green, and blue-green are analogous to each other. Blue-violet, red-violet, and red are analogous to each other. See, that was pretty easy actually. They're just next door to each other. Let's look at analogous color schemes in famous artwork. Let's look at Irises in a Vase by Vincent van Gogh. This was painted in about 1890, and he was Dutch. And look to see if you recognize any analogous colors. Do you see yellows, blues, and greens? Yeah, he used analogous colors there. This is Vincent van Gogh again, and this was in 1889. And this is one of his most famous pieces called The Starry Night. Do you see any colors that are closely related to each other? I see blue, blue-violet, and red-violet. This is once again Vincent van Gogh, and this is from 1888. Do you see yellows, blues, greens, like I do? It seems that Vincent van Gogh often used analogous color schemes, doesn't it? This is The Milkmaid. It's not by Jan Vermeer, it's Johannes Vermeer, I apologize. And he was Dutch as well, but he lived in 1658, hundreds of years before Van Gogh. Do you see analogous colors? Yellow, blue, green? And this last piece is The Water Lily Pond by Claude Monet in 1889, and he was French. Again, are you seeing those yellows, blues, and greens that are next door to each other in the color wheel? Boy, analogous color schemes are really loved by artists, but it's also such a huge part of nature. This is a map of the Netherlands. Dutch means the people or the language from the Netherlands in Northern Europe, and Vincent van Gogh and Johannes Vermeer were both Dutch. Now, Amsterdam is the capital city, and it's right on the North Sea, west of Germany, and north of Belgium and France. Claude Monet was from France in southwestern Europe, and Vincent van Gogh did most of his paintings, his famous ones, from France. Notice where France is? It's north of that yellow shape that looks like a boot. That's Italy. We have covered so much information, it's incredible. Let's review. We learned about the color temperatures and how colors are relative. And we learned about the principle of design called contrast. And we learned about analogous colors. And we're going to learn about monochromatic color schemes. And they're very easy too. See that pie shape of the kind of navy blue? It's actually blue-violet. Those are all monochromatic colors. They're the same hue, but they are different tints, tones, and shades. It's vocabulary time again. What does monochromatic mean? Mono means one. Chroma means color. Chrome means color too. Therefore, monochrome means one color. Monochromatic means one color. Making monochromatic colors. You adjust the value. Shades are darker in value. Tints are lighter in value. Alter the intensity. Adding grays to a hue creates tones and reduces the brightness or intensity. Alter the saturation. Adding black, white, gray, or earth tones will change the saturation of the hue. That's kind of like purity. This is a painter's color mixing terminology chart, and we're going to be using words such as tint, tone, and shade quite a bit, and forever as long as we're discussing art. And we're going to be learning about what grays and blacks and whites do to a pure color or a hue. Changing hues, values, and intensity. There's a pure hue. Here's tints, they're mixed with white, tones are mixed with gray, and shades are mixed with black. Look what it does to the color, to the hue. Tints, base color plus white, tones, base color plus gray, and shades are add black. Tones are colors of reduced intensity. The brightness of the hue is dulled by adding gray. How do we make gray? Black and white. And we can add earth tones too. This is a monochromatic color wheel. Do you see at the bottom where it says pure hue? That's your pure color. And the tints up on the right hand top, they're mixed with white. The shades, you mix them with black. Look at these last two monochromatic color schemes. We've got a red family and a green family. The shades, do you remember what we mixed with them? To make tints, do you remember what we used? Monochromatic color schemes in famous artwork. Vincent van Gogh, Self-Portrait, 1889. What monochromatic theme do you see throughout his picture? The old guitarist, Pablo Picasso, 1910, Spanish. This was during his blue period. This is Untitled Red on Red by Mark Rothko, circa 1950-1970, American. Azure Shadow, Elizabeth McGraw, contemporary American. Yellow Sweet Peas by Georgia O'Keeffe, 1925, American. Canyon, Georgia O'Keeffe, 1965, American. Coscob, Georgia O'Keeffe, 1926, American. Wow, it's time for a review. We have learned so much today, it's unbelievable. We learned about color relationships like the temperatures, analogous colors, monochromatic. Here's the warm and the cool. Remember that? Remember we learned about how colors are relative. They look different according to what they're next to and what they're made out of. We learned about the principle of design of contrast, the pairing of opposites. We learned about analogous colors that are next door to each other on the color wheel. And we learned about monochromatic color schemes and tints and tones and shades. So we learned an awful lot today. And I thank you for your loyal attention, and I wish you happy coloring. Yo amo el paso.